Hello and welcome to my new UX and UI design channel. This will be my platform to share the things I have learned with you while working in the design industry. In this video, I will be discussing everything you need to know about frames and why you should nearly always be using frames in Figma over rectangles. Let's get started. If you don't have time to watch the video, definitely save it and come back to it later. But if I'm able to give you one piece of advice, try to use frames as much as possible. This will increase your workflow and also reduce the amount of layers in your file. Let's start by making a frame and a rectangle. So in our toolbar at the top, next to our move tool in blue, we have the frame tool, which is shortcut F. This is a region tool, and we have rectangle shortcut R, and this is a shape tool. So by clicking frame tool, we can click and rectangle click. By default, it just makes a 100 by 100 pixel frame and rectangle. So there are three distinguishing factors between these two. First one, the fill color by default is different, and we can change this quite easily. The frame tool also has its layer name displayed at the top left. So frame 25, this just means we've made 24 frames previously in this file. So if we were to make another frame, it will be frame 26. You can also see the frame bold. So the layer name is bold in the layer panel, and there's also an icon that indicates their different types. So the frame has the frame tool icon, and the rectangle has the square, which is the rectangle tool icon. We can also make rectangles into frames. So hovering over this rectangle, we can right click frame selection, which is the shortcut Option Command G. As you can see, it says frame 26, which is the next number. And in the layers panel, it is now bold with the frame icon. We can convert it back into a rectangle by going right click, ungroup, shortcut Shift Command G. As you can see, it's back to a rectangle. The layer name is gone from the top left, and the icon is a rectangle. So I'm going to ungroup frame 25, which is the left one, and I'll show you what happens. So go right click, ungroup, and it disappears, and it's also gone from the layer panel. So why did it actually disappear? I'm going to undo with Command Z, and I'm going to make the right one a frame again. So the difference we have here is when we look at the layers panel, frame 26 has a triangle on the side, which means there are layers within this layer. So if I click on it to show the drop down, we can see this is the rectangle we made previously, and it's within this frame. However, frame 25, as we made it with the frame tool, has nothing inside. So when you ungroup, it actually deletes this frame layer, so the frame 26 layer, and it just leaves whatever is left inside. So because frame 25 has nothing inside, when I ungroup it, it disappears. So you might be thinking to yourself, what's the difference and big deal about rectangles and frames, if at the end of the day, you can make a rectangle into a frame later? I would say there are two big differences which drive me kind of nuts. The first one is layers. So we can see in the first example, the rectangle that we framed selection afterwards, you can see this one has 2 layers, whereas frame 25 has 1 layer. So that's the first thing. By making rectangles and then framing them later, you actually add another layer. Whereas in most cases, you probably don't even need to do that. The second annoying thing is changing the color. So this is more from a workflow perspective. So say you've jumped onto a project that had elements created already, and someone tells you, can you please change frame 25 into a yellow frame? So you can go frame 25, yep, I can do that, fill yellow. Pretty straightforward. Frame 26, let's try to do the same thing. So click frame 26, fill. So right now it's invisible, and you're like, why is it invisible? But I'm just going to make it yellow, show you first. So now it's yellow, but nothing has changed. Why is that? So actually the fill of the frame is what's at the very back, and every element inside is on top. So if I undo, I'm going to undo. If I show you this again, So I'm now selecting the frame and I want to select this rectangle inside. If I move this rectangle inside, you can see the frame is actually invisible, which is why when I selected it before, it had this closed eye icon. So if I click it, it just adds the fill, which is white by default. So when I changed the fill to yellow, what actually happened? So I changed the fill to yellow. So yes, the frame actually changed yellow, but because there was a gray rectangle on top, it looked like nothing happened. So this is one of the first lessons about frames and rectangles is one, by using rectangles and then framing them later, you actually add an additional layer, which is very cluttering in your file. And two, it actually makes it hard for someone to change the color of your frames unless they know the project file really well. Because like I said, if I was trying to change this to yellow like it is right now, nothing really changes. And then that person will have to go through the layers and change it layer by layer. So for example, if I wanted to make it red, I'm like, oh my gosh, let's try red. Nothing's working. I'm going to have to go to that rectangle, which is gray. So I just double click to enter to click the rectangle. And I'm going to have to make this red now. So it's just adding a few more steps, which can be quite annoying for people coming onto your project file. Frames and rectangles also differ in their properties. So when I select this rectangle, these are the properties I can manipulate. However, when I click on frame, there seems to be a few more properties. So let's compare these. On the left, we have the frame properties, and on the right, we have the rectangle properties. As you can see, in the frame properties, it has all the rectangle properties included. However, there are 4 additional features. 1, the framing tools, clipping tools, auto layout, and frame grids. So let's look at these additional properties. I'm going to click on this frame. The first one, we can actually control the size of the frame by clicking one of these presets that Figma gives us. So for example, if I want to make a screen for Apple Watch 44mm, the frame will just adjust to suit. A handy one I like to use is the iPhone 11 Pro Max. You can change the frame layout as well from portrait to landscape, which is pretty handy. And next, you can also resize to fit. So what does this mean? You can actually change the size of the frame to match the extent of all the elements within. So if I hover over it and see this logo, there's a white border around the logo. So actually when I click on this button, you can see how the frame has shrunk to match the extent of the outermost elements. So we can quickly, easily go back. We're just clicking iPhone 11 Pro Max again, and now we're back. So you might be wondering, why is this text cut off here and that logo invisible? One of the cool features is the clip content. What that means is it hides everything outside of the frame boundaries. So I can just click it temporarily just to check, bring it back. So now we're going to skip auto layout for a bit and we're going to layout grids. So we're going to check layout grids. Pretty straightforward. You can do some funky stuff here. If you want columns, rows, you can edit all these features. Also, auto layout. So this one's a bit more confusing. Let's just unclip this. So if I make a frame into an auto layout, what actually happens? So in an auto layout, we actually care more about the spacing between elements. So if I make this 50, it changes. Whereas let's undo, let's go back before the auto layout. Whereas if the auto layout is turned off, it means we actually care more about the frame size than the elements. So we don't really care about the spacing. We can still play with the spacing, but probably not in this instance. Because if we want to design a screen for a mobile, we want to make sure the frame is always matching this size. So now we have explored the additional properties of frames. What other things are frames good for? So one limitation that I'm glad that we don't have is that you can actually put frames within frames. So I have frame 10 here at the top and frame 11, this orange square. So actually when I drag in this square within the frame, like I can do with any other element, it comes in. However, the layer name disappears. Not a big deal. I think it's actually quite good because you don't want to see thousands of layer names if you have multiple frames inside. You can also see in the layers panel that frame 11 is now within frame 10 and it's no longer bold. So it's just acting like a regular element. Pretty handy. Now with this yellow circle, when I click on it, it has these crazy coordinates, 5,635 on the X and 658 on the Y. How do I know where to put it to get into that corner? So one of the good things about frames is it actually resets the coordinate system. So if I bring it into this, firstly into frame 10, I can just hover directly and it knows to put it into frame 11. As you can see, now the system has gone back to the start. So now the top left of this frame is 0, 0. So if I just click and drag, 0, 0, pretty cool. And if I want to offset it by 10 on either side, just type 10, 10. Perfect, very easy. It's better than having that 5,000 out there. I wouldn't even know what number to put this one in. As you could see, I could drag it directly into frame 11 because this element was a lot smaller than this frame. Super handy. However, what if it's a lot bigger? It'd be super annoying. Sometimes it doesn't know how to get into it. The easiest workaround, let's make it a bit bigger. The easiest workaround is using the layers panel. So for example, if I want to put it into frame 11, I can just click it. So I'm going to click this ellipse 6, which is the layer name of this one, and drag it into frame 11. And now it's cropped because this frame has clip content on, so I can unclip it. Pretty cool. And now I'm just gonna bring it out. Let's make it a nice small thing again. So the final perk of using frames is we have these align tools. So we can actually align an element to the edge of a frame. So if I click align left, it jumps to the leftmost extent of the frame. And also I can do align top, align right, align down. Why is this handy? So I can quickly center objects as well. Now imagine what the power of this tool is. So now I've centered the red square in this frame, and I've also centered this yellow dot within this red frame. Frames also enable properties for elements within them. So when I click on this red square, we can see in constraints, it's left and top. What does this mean? So in constraint properties, we're sort of telling Figma, what do we want the shape or element to do when the frame changes size? So right now, left and top means whatever happens to this frame, it will always be the left and top, and it will never move. So let's select all these elements. Let's make them all left and top. Yep, they're all left and top. You can also click on these as a quick way. So if I go left and top, if I click on the bottom right hand corner, so clip contents is off, and I drag it, nothing seems to happen because it's following that left and top, which is not changing. However, if I control the left and top, all the shapes move according to left and top. This is really handy. We can do other things. So for example, this one, I can make it bottom and right. And this one, I want to make scale. So what does this mean? It means if I move this one, the yellow circle should move with the bottom and right. And the black should scale according to the size of the frame. Okay, now let's put all the things we've learned into practice. I want to make a mobile screen with a subscribe now button. So I'm just going to click on frame, pretty easy. Because it's for mobile, I'm just going to make it for iPhone 11 Pro Max. Let's get it into the screen. So now I want to make a button. So let's say the button, I want it to be a 30 gap on either side for no particular reason. So let's just make it like height. Let's go 60. And round those corners with, let's say, 4 for fun. Nah, that's not enough. Let's go 8. That's a bit better. We're going to change this frame into a cool color. Let's pick this nice blue. And for text, we want to write subscribe. Let's use caps. Subscribe now. So because we have this as a frame, we can just drop it in and center it using these tools. Align horizontal centers, vertical centers, pretty nice. Bring it in. And now we want to make it 30 gaps. So what we can do is let's do a bit of math. So frame 19 is 414. So this one, this button, we can just go 414 minus 30 gap either side. So there's 60 minus 60. That's the size. Now we can center it. That's pretty cool. How far from the bottom do we want it? Let's make it down here. And we'll make it a 60 gap. So we minus 60. The final things we want to do is make sure we check responsive design. So make sure that if this frame changes, this button always follows suit. So we want it to always be from the bottom. We always want it to be 60 from the bottom. So just click on the bottom. And for left and right, we'll just use scale. Now let's see what happens. So if for some reason the mobile screen was a lot shorter, the button would always be at the bottom. And if it was wider, ooh, there's something wrong here. So we want to do the same thing for this text. We want to make sure it's in the center again. But we want to make sure it's always in the center. So we can also click in the middle. So center, center, it will always be in the center of this button. So if I make this button bigger, it will always be in the center. Really cool. You might be wondering to yourself, why do we ever use the rectangle tool when the frame tool can do everything? I think there are 3 use cases, and if you know any more, please leave them in the comments below. So the first one, when I click on frame, we have 2 buttons at the top, create component, use as mask, whereas the rectangle has 1 additional button at the top, which is edit object. So the first thing we can do with rectangles is we can make different polygons, which is quite handy. The second thing is the mask tool. So you might be thinking, I can make interesting shapes with the frame if I use the mask tool, because the frame has a mask tool. Use as mask. So I'm going to click these 2. So I'm going to show you frame 22 here. And then if I use the mask tool, what actually happens? As you can see, frame 22 is no longer a frame. So it just acts like another rectangle. So yes, you can use a mask, but it neatly converts it to a rectangle for us. Finally is the Boolean group tools. So when I select 2 frames, as you can see, we still have the create component and use as mask tool. But when we select 2 rectangles, we have this new tool at the top, which is the Boolean group tools. So I'm going to click on that. We can do union selection, subtract selection. So this is just changes what the shape looks like. So for example, let's do exclude selection. So it just excludes whatever is overlapping. As you can see, now I have that one shape with the overlapping bit cut out. So what do we learn here? we learned that the rectangle tool is good for making unique shapes. My personal workflow is I like to use Illustrator more for creating unique shapes. I personally feel like there is more functionality there, and I'm more comfortable making the shapes I want in Illustrator, and it's quite easy to bring it into Figma later. But definitely, if you want to make something funky in Figma, the rectangle tool is the way to go. If you were paying very careful attention when I was showing the presets, there's actually this really neat but never do it functionality where you can make a frame into a group. So I'm just going to unclip the content so we can actually see what happens. There are two things that happen when you make a frame into a group. So now it's changed. As you can see in my selection, the frame icon has changed into this dashed rectangle, which indicates group. So it appears to have done two things. One, it has done that resize to fit that we did before. And two, the fill of the frame has disappeared. So even if I go back to frame now, it's sort of gone, very bad. So let's just go back to iPhone 11 Pro Max. I'll bring the fill back. So where's my fill? We want to just add a fill, make it white. We want to clip it again. Now we're back. Okay, so what did we learn here? Very bad. Frames to groups, very bad. I don't know why you would ever want to do that. I understand if you have a group because you were lazy and you wanted to make it a frame later, that's fine. So for example, if I had two objects and I was lazy and just wanted to group them as a quick way to manipulate them as a pair, and I was like, yep, I want to make it into a frame now. Very good. You should always do that. Always make things into frames, but never make a frame into a group. Please do not do that. Hopefully I was able to bring you some value today through this video. Thank you for your support. If you ever find yourself on a Figma file and someone's using rectangles in the wrong way, definitely direct them straight to this video and hopefully they never do it again. Stay hydrated, take a break, and I'll catch you guys next time.